he said that he would call. In fact, he said it twice. I remember his words perfectly. He said to me, "I'll call you when I arrive. You'll do great today. Just be yourself. I'll call you this afternoon." His baritone voice was resonating in my ears. His blue eyes were locked on me, and I believed every word he said. And I had every reason to, because he had told me many things that came true. He was right every time, so I believed it. At 3:02 p.m., the bell rang for the end of school, and I darted out of Mrs. Betterday's classroom, headed for the bike area. I could have been thinking about all kinds of different things, but I was thinking about that oral presentation that I'd given that went perfectly, that Dad and Mom had advised me on. It was amazing. I was also thinking about that badminton tournament that we had in PE, and Chelsea and I had been a team, and we had gotten all the way to the final round. I was also thinking about helping Martin in our class, who'd been having a problem with geometry this year. He was having such a problem that the teacher asked me if I would help him out, and so I did, and she surprised me with an award for helping him out, even though I didn't have to. And I was thinking about all these things because it had been a really good day, better than most of my days. But then the thing that kept coming back to me was I needed to get home because of the phone call. Dad was going to call. So I raced to the bike area. I was ahead of everybody else. I spun my lock, I popped open the lock, I clipped my helmet, and I mounted my bike before anybody else even came into the bike area. I left school, it was like a racetrack, weaving through everybody, and I finally got out exchanging "see you laters" with all my friends, and they faded into the background as the wind was rushing past my ears as I picked up speed. I clicked the shifter on my bike, and my bike settled into the next gear, a higher gear, and I was flying. I came around the corner, 2 blocks from home. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, I tapped the garage door app, I opened my garage door, and I thought, a couple extra seconds, that'll help. I went into my garage, I parked my bike and stowed it right where I always do, and I was so excited. 3:16 p.m., 1 whole minute sooner than I'd ever gotten home before. A personal best. I could not wait to get in the house for the phone call, so I powered through the door, and that's when I heard it. So how about we stop there? You want to know the ending? Yeah. All right, I'll make you a deal. You choose the ending. I powered through the door, and that's when I heard it. The phone was ringing. I didn't even look at the caller ID. I just picked up the phone, and it was my dad. And I spent the next hour telling him about my day. That's option 1. I powered through the door, and I heard, and that's when I heard it. I saw it, and I heard it at the same time. There were screams and shouts. Surprise! It was the greatest surprise birthday party ever. Option number 3. I powered through the door, and that's when I heard it. Silence. There was not a sound in the house. And I had a terrible feeling about what was next. Okay, what do you like? 1, 2, or 3? 1, 2, 3. Alright, I like some of you, the risk takers. The 4 stories that tell the story of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they all end differently. Now, of course, they all end generally the same way. Of course, Jesus was risen from the dead, the tomb was empty, the women find out about it, the disciples discover it. That's the ending overall, but they all end in a slightly different way. Some have some people doing these things. Some endings have these things happening. Some people show up in this story, other people don't show up in this story. The details of who's there, who's not there, who talks, who doesn't, what they think, what they don't think, it's all different in every one of the stories. And 3 of the stories in particular always get invited to Easter. Matthew gets invited to Easter a lot. Because Matthew is the ending that we call the ride off into the sunset ending. You know, the women find the tomb empty. They come and they tell the disciples. The disciples believe it. And then Jesus shows up and he says, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've taught you. And it's like, yes. And they ride off into the sunset.
Wow.
Now, Luke also gets invited to Easter quite often. And Luke we could call the self-discovery ending. For those of you that like to discover things on your own, Luke is your story. Luke's the one where they show up at the tomb, they discover that Jesus isn't there, and they tell the disciples, but some people don't believe it. And so then there's this long, drawn-out story where Jesus shows up, walking alongside the two followers, and they start talking. They don't realize it's Jesus. And over the course of this walk and this discussion that day, they discover that it really is Jesus. It's that self-discovery story. Now, John also gets invited to Easter a lot. John's the one that we could call the reality check ending. Because the women find that the tomb is empty. Then Peter and John discover that the tomb is empty also. And there are all sorts of mixed reactions about what actually happened. And so everybody thinks all these different things. And that's when Jesus shows up and meets different people. And there's Thomas who looks at Jesus' hands and realizes, oh, it did happen. So there's all these mixed reactions. Well, then Jesus shows up on the seashore and they're all fishing and Jesus creates that amazing catch of fish. They all come back, they have breakfast, and they talk. And they talk about what happened and why it happened and how it happened. And they all kind of have this reality check of what actually went on. We're missing one. We're missing Mark. Mark does not get invited to Easter very often. That's because Mark's ending is a tough one. If you were to open your Bible now, or open it on your phone, or open it when you get home, you'd see that the ending of Mark chapter 16, is a mess. It's a mess because there's all these lines, and these breaks, and these asterisks, and these footnotes at the ending of Mark. And then there's a shorter ending, and then there's a longer ending. It's like we can choose what ending we want at the end of the story of Jesus as Mark tells it. And you gotta wonder, what's going on with that? Why does Mark end in those ways? It's the ending that we choose that makes a huge difference. So, we're going to read Mark chapter 16. It's in your bulletin. You can follow along. This is the ending of Mark until all the mess happens. Saturday evening, when the Sabbath ended, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome went out and purchased burial spices so they could anoint Jesus' body. Very early on Sunday morning, just at sunrise, they went to the tomb. On the way, they were asking each other, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" But as they arrived, they looked up and saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled aside. When they entered the tomb, they saw a young man clothed in a white robe sitting on the right side. The women were shocked. But the angel said, "Don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He isn't here. He has risen from the dead. Look, this is where they laid his body. Now go and tell his disciples, including Peter, that Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there just as he told you before he died." The women fled from the tomb, trembling and bewildered. And they said nothing to anyone because they were too frightened. That's the first ending. That's not exactly a crowd pleaser, is it? That does not get you invited to Easter. That is not the ringer that brings Jesus home and saves people. I mean, that is a downer of an ending. I mean, that is tough. And so there's a shorter ending. And the shorter ending, if you read it later on, it describes that the women did go back and they told the disciples, and guess what happened? The disciples believed everything, and the gospel spread all over the world. Happily ever after. The longer ending takes longer to tell the story, but eventually they get there. And again, the gospel spreads everywhere. Jesus saves people, and the disciples are telling so many people about Jesus. Happily ever after. So what is going on? How many of you like a cliffhanger book, a cliffhanger movie? Now what if you never knew the end to the cliffhanger? No, see that you got to read the sequel, or you got to go watch the next movie, or go to the next book, or whatever it is. We don't like cliffhangers that never tell us the end of the story. That's exactly what happened with Mark. See, picture Bibles like a family tree. Let's say you start with great-grandma Josephine, and you work your way down. The shape of that kind of a family tree starts with one person, and then it fans out to all of her descendants, right? That's how Bibles work. The original Bible was written by the people who wrote it, and then as people wanted to share the Bible with others, originally they copied it by hand, and then once the printing press was invented, then it was printed, and there's all these Bibles that are out there. Well, when they copied it by hand, originally, there were some people who probably read this and said, hold on a minute, that cannot be the end of the story of Jesus. Because Jesus has got to reign, and Jesus has got to do stuff, and this has got to be a big moment, the biggest moment. We can't leave it like this. And so they added in some shorter endings that fit. They tell the rest of the story. You know, they go along with Matthew and Luke and John, but they're not how Mark ended. And they're not how Mark meant to end the story. See, the ending we choose matters a whole lot. If we choose the happily ever after ending, then everything's just fine and good and we really don't have to do anything. If we choose the ending that Mark gave us, then who's going to tell people about Jesus? Maybe it's you and me. The old adage goes like this. The best things in life don't come. And another way to do it, the best things in life don't come easily. Free and easily. Sometimes harder is better. A lot of times you've heard people share with you that they've gone through a rough patch, a tough situation. It could be minorly tough or it could be desperately tough. Things that we don't know what to do with, things that we don't know where to go. Our friends at school are not treating us kindly like they should, and they're not getting disciplined for it. Or our family member who's supposed to care for us is not caring for us like they're supposed to. Or that sickness, that illness, it's got us down and our body's hurt and we don't know what to do and it's not going away. I mean, we all deal with things that happen that are hard. And when those things have a resolution eventually, so many times I have heard people, and of you even say, it was hard, but I'm glad I went through it. I'm glad I had to go through it because I'm better, or I'm stronger, or I found out what I really am made of, or I know what I grab onto when things are hard. Harder is often better. Many of us empty our little bags of coins on the way in. If you carried your bag of coins around for the last 40-ish days or so, if you did, think back to like week 1, when there was, we added a penny a day throughout those 40 days of Lent to feel that weight. What did it feel like in week 1? Yeah, not much. It's like, is it even there? When was the turning point for you where all of a sudden you started to feel, this is uncomfortable? Midway? Day 20? Yeah, I mean, the last week, 35 through 40? Oh, totally annoying. I mean, I had mine in my back pocket a lot of the time because I stand a lot. Whenever I sit down, I'm like, oh, I forgot. I mean, and you're kind of leaning like this because it's heavy. It was very uncomfortable. But we did that so that we would feel the weight of our sin. And you know, when we dumped him in the jar, if you did, there's a sense that I don't feel crooked anymore. I don't feel that discomfort like I felt before. The weight is gone. But to go through those 40 days, it's hard work. It's annoying. Sometimes harder can be better. So which ending do we choose for Mark? Do we choose the ending where we don't know what actually happened and maybe we have to fill in the blank? Do we choose the ending that's easy and happily ever after? Do we choose the long ending that tells us more of the story and we got all the details there and it still ends up really well? Sometimes harder can be better. What's the ending in your life that you're shooting for? You know, not to say that life is over, not to say that this is it, and you know, this is the culmination, it's all downhill. No, not at all. But what's the ending that you're shooting for? What's the goal that you're aiming for? Is that goal bigger than you are? Is that goal something that you feel like God has put before you? Is that ending something that includes Jesus? Mark would say that ending needs to include Jesus because he makes all the difference when God raised him from the dead. Let's pray.